Golly gosh, well thanks for hanging around. You haven't been seduced off to the toy fair. I popped in on the way this morning. It was really good. If you don't, I guess some of you know a bit about me. This is some of what I'm doing at the moment. Actually, to be honest, I'm having the time of my life. Able to choose what I do, and say, you know, people say, "Would you like to do this?" And I say, "No, it's really boring. I wouldn't like to." So some of the stuff I'm engaged with at the moment, I do some horizon scanning for the government. They say, rather amusingly, actually, they say, "Stephen, what are the things that are going to happen we haven't anticipated in terms of policy?" It's like, well, everything, you know. But I have a little office up there in Tower Bridge, which is quite cool. The last thing we looked at was cognitive enhancement. Can you make people smarter artificially? Just think what that does to learning for a minute. It's quite interesting, and you can. So that was a bit of a wake-up call for them. You know. This time of the year, I live on my boat. That's my boat there. I live on my boat up at Tower Bridge and live on that, which is quite nice too. I have PhD students. That's one of them here. He's Andrew has just been filming a recent episode, one of the David Tennant episodes of Doctor Who. He owns that TARDIS. He builds it. Curiously, he had it in his office. We never quite understood why he didn't put the office in the TARDIS. But anyway, it's a whole other debate. He's reshooting current episodes of Doctor Who in 1960s technology with, you know, analog cameras in a little tiny studio. And then he's making some of the old Hartnell Doctor Who's with full CGI and so on. It's all down at Bournemouth University. And slightly alarmingly at the moment, actually, probably a good point to end the thing on, the 1960s version of the David Tennant ones are a lot better than the David Tennant ones, which is all quite interesting. Damn. I'm building a lot of schools around. I'm building a lab school in Florida University. I'm building an Inuit school in Alaska. I'm building my own school. I think there's something that happens when you get old. I find myself as lead sponsor of an academy. I'm clearly not a carpet baron, but I'm doing it anyway. It's kind of interesting academy. It's a 0 to 21 plus institution. They crawl in as babies and sort of stagger out as undergraduates at the other end. So there is no phase break at all. You literally start. In fact, you get put into your home base the minute your mum's expecting. So we're literally putting a sticker on the bump, you know. Little tiny home-based community, about 110 kids. So you never see more than about 200 children in your entire journey through to being an undergraduate. Really interesting project. But Portland in Dorset, keep up with it. But even more interesting, I'm doing a lot of work in post-conflict zones, which really interests me at the moment. What on earth do you do in Haiti? Never mind. I'm tending to look more at war zones, but you know what happens when a country goes wrong? The kids all get thrown out of school. They always shoot the teachers. It's disconcerting. Learning professionals always put to the sword first. But then you have a generation of kids who've got no learning to do for a decade, and then when these things run their course, usually take about that long. You think that the economy recovers, and you've got a lost generation. What do we do with that? So I'm really, really, really interested in how we can use learning to patch up those things. Doing some work in Kurdistan and talked to the minister there. So in the design of your schools, what's the most important thing as we spend this World Bank money on your new schools? And she said, the most important design feature, from the air, they mustn't look like military installations. That was her first piece of feedback. It's sort of sobering really. They'd learnt, you know. So that's all interesting, and I'm having a lot of fun. I've rebuilt the whole education system out in country in the Caribbean. That's me in the hard hat down there, which is fascinating. You know, taking a nation, the Cayman Islands, and turning learning into the third leg of their economic system. They've got finance, tourism, and learning. Gives you a real sense of just what decade we're in, I think. You know, so it's exciting times, really, and all the more so in terms of where we are today, because I think we're at this really rather interesting crossroads. Where we've sort of rolled up to the millennium with a focus on productivity, with training in the corporate sector, with ghastly factory schools, which I'm sure David will have dwelt on a bit yesterday. You know. Dick Turpin model of learning, stand and deliver. Everybody gets robbed, And suddenly we find ourselves in a new millennium with new approaches. And those new approaches, I think, have a big impact. This is the most words you'll see on any slide I show you today, so don't recoil, You can't get that all into Twitter, can you? And you can see that you don't need I hate being read to, but you sense the uniformity, the hierarchical structures, the isolation, the rigidity, the plug-simple performance indicators, and the contrast, really, with suddenly where we're going with corporate learning, with community learning, with school learning, with undergraduate learning. It really has got no limits in terms of time or place, that it's full of engagement. But spectacularly, the difference that we're really seeing is that this now is cheap to provide. It's extraordinary that almost all the bits of your life that have been touched by technology, with a very few exceptions, are substantially cheaper, apart from learning. Perhaps medicine too, but then, we're all living twice as long, and I clearly need rebuilding pretty often, and about the rest of you. So, medicine's changed a little bit. But what's even more interesting is that those old models of learning produced people that were frankly cheap to employ. That was jolly handy in the sort of 1950s and 60s when we had people knocking the hubcaps on the side of a Ford Cortina? What was it then? Ford Anglia? I'm not sure I can go back that far. Ford Prefect? Knocking the hubcaps on the side of a Ford, anyway, was a pretty mindless job, and the fact that we had a learning system that produced mindless people was no surprise. But now, the mindless work's all been done by robots, or it's been outsourced, and we want kids who are smart enough to build better robots, and we want people in the corporate sector who are smart enough to be able to manage outsourcing. There's a whole different ball game. So the game's up. It's changed, and it's changed radically. And make no mistake, that has an impact on the sector that you're in like no other. Your guarantees of being here in 5 years' time or 10 years' time are more fragile than they've ever been. Doesn't mean that learning is going to disappear, but for sure there will be new providers. For sure there will be alternatives. A big call for you really is, what do we do about that? And of course, part of the problem for all of us, I think, is the sheer pace of all this. Dear God, here we are on a Thursday afternoon. I'm going to show you a graph. That's pretty bleak, isn't it, really? But but hey, let's do it. Any 21st century graph is going to look pretty much the same. On the vertical axis, you remember from your school days, y is up. On the y-axis, it's logarithmic, and on the x-axis, x's are across. It's a straight. And what we get, of course, is always a straight line with that logarithm. I don't care whether I'm plotting something as compelling as the number of transistors per microprocessor, or the price of the transistors, or internet data traffic. Have I got that? What else have I got here? Oh, it doesn't matter what I'm plotting. I'm going to get that straight line on that logarithmic axis. And basically what that means in terms of us is this. It means that we're on this logarithmic curve, and we're off the flat floodplain. We're up the scree slopes, and we're heading for the hilly bit. And when we were on the floodplain, it was easy peasy, wasn't it? You had heaps of time to reflect on tiny changes. I've been an Apple user for a long time. I'm a bit of a newbie. I didn't start till 84, so I admit, came to it a bit late, really. But I started when the Macintosh appeared. And I remember having a vigorous debate for 2 or 3 years about whether the screen should be colour or black or white. Oh, I'm not sure. Colour may be distracting, Nothing wrong with green and black, it's good, easy on the eye, Can't see what it says, though. We had plenty of time, yesterday the iPad was out, and we were all saying, where the hell's the GPS, where's the camera? And that 6 months and now all those extra bits will be in. So, suddenly we're in a world where we've got huge changes and damn all time to reflect, really. And in terms of where you are, that's hugely important, because it means that old model of let's pilot it a bit, let's have a bit of iteration and maybe a pause for reflection, and then perhaps we should legislate, and then review our progress. And I helped Singapore write a 5-year plan every year for 4 years. And I thought, this is getting silly. So suddenly we're in a world of agility, of pace, of being ready, absolutely ready for the unexpected. And that is very much a different world to the ones that we were in before. I do some quite interesting work with working with our Olympic coaches. And Britain, as you know, was pretty rubbish at the Olympics in Atlanta. I think when we turned up for Atlanta, I think probably half our athletes couldn't even find the games. It's pretty disastrous. Now, in some of our sports, we come home with bucket loads of medals. Sailing is my sport. Being top nation last 3 Olympics. What did we change? It was really interesting. We changed the model of learning so that we just assumed everybody would know their stuff. They wouldn't even get anywhere near a stab at a medal if they weren't really good at what they did. But we focused the learning on being ready for the unexpected, being able to cope with an entirely new world on a minute-by-minute basis. So when our folk all turned up at Qingdao this last Olympics, the least windy regatta in history, it was expected to be, and all the data for the previous 10 years showed in August the wind does not blow in that part of China. But all the data failed to allow for the fact that the Chinese were going to clear the smog. And because when they cleared the smog, we got the land heated up like mad thermal breezes, and it blew old boots, as you can see here. There's a wonderful quote from one of the American sailors who arrived with a boat that was extra short, so it would go fast, and was looking really good for 2 days till the wind blew, and then was practically lost. And he said rather wonderfully, as you can see, we expected the unexpected, we weren't prepared for this. The model of learning we need to work on is one where we expect the unexpected and we are prepared for everything. And that's a completely different world from the old content is king delivery model that dominated. Content is no way near king. In a world where every minute I've been talking, 10 hours of video is given away to YouTube and free for you, I thought the content might be king. Would be naive in the extreme. If content isn't king, what is? Well, community might just be sovereign. And memberships might just be pretty important. Let's have a little reflect on that changing business model maybe for a moment. Some quotes here from people I've talked to recently. I won't tell you which organisations they were. You could guess. Well, at the top one's Skype, isn't it? But you can work out who they are. Spot the big stone, But the world that they're in is rapidly changing. Those old 20th century worlds of learning, it was all about scarcity. It was about defining a channel. It was about building barriers to entry of new competition, building cartels, protecting yourself. It's a world that would be familiar to many, to Pearson, to the BBC, to goodness knows who else. It was a world where delivery was important. The most important people in the organisation were lawyers because they protected those scarce channels. By the time we get to the millennium, and gosh, it seems a long time ago now. Do you remember the parties? Jeepers. I was in the dome. I was absolutely legless, locked in a room with 34 cases of vintage champagne. There were only 8 of us because the security was so fierce nobody could actually get into the dome. So I was lucky. No one got there, really. It was all great. But, as we kind of rolled through the millennium, the business model became scale, attention, dominate, and then sell the company quick, because it wasn't making any money. You were just, or maybe borrow against the company. But scale was the whole thing. Aggregation was the task. Be big. Don't even think about charging for your services. Just be the dominant one. And then on that basis, you will borrow huge amounts of money. You could do what you like with the money. And the geeks were hugely important at that point because you needed people with the right really cool code and be surprising. Not that they didn't have to be particularly innovative, because online learning communities, as you said, have been around since the 80s, and we built some lovely ones early on. But you needed people who could do it and knew what a lookup table catastrophe looked like and how to avoid it. But now the world that we're in has matured beyond that, and suddenly what really, really matters are memberships. It's about esteem, it's about praise-rich environments, about contribution. Above all else, it's about things that endure. You don't want to belong to something and commit your life to it and your membership. And people would belong to very few things Gosh, the early work we did, even in the beginning of the 90s, right at the dawn of the web, really, was pretty clear that people wouldn't belong to more than 2 or at the most 3. You think how difficult your life is just managing the communities you belong to face to face. You know, you've got your immediate family, your extended family, your college mates who you still regard as personal friends, even though you haven't spoken for a decade. You know, and then perhaps your work friends. Just making all that work at Christmas and the New Year is hard enough. So throwing 20 more online communities into that was never going to happen. So at most you're going to belong to 1 or 2. Well, if you're going to throw your effort, your life and soul into belonging to an online learning community or a community of practice, you've got to know it's going to endure. You've got to know it's going to be around for a long time. So suddenly those memberships, that is esteem, become really important, and trust becomes absolutely the key word. And look at who's suddenly become important in terms of the corporate world. It's not the lawyers anymore. Anybody here from a bank, by the way? No, I wouldn't admit it. Oh, well done. That's not very brave. It's not the geeks. It's the learning professionals. It's the people who are making that community work internally and externally. So, you know, what an interesting time. You reflect on your commercial lives over this time. Golly gosh. Here's a little, well, let's take a moment just to remind ourselves of some of the things that have changed. Yeah, I love, I'm sure you all use Google Translate. Look, here's, hello, how are you in Cardiff? There we go, look, real-time translation. And if you haven't been into Google Mail and realised that this works in chat, you're in for some surprises. Real-time chat translation is pretty cool. Google reckon about 18 months off making it work on your phone. I mean, you've already got voice-to-speech, text-to-speech, and speech-to-text, haven't you? So why wouldn't it work on your phone pretty quickly? So, you know, suddenly some of the really insurmountable problems of... I was in a session just before, somebody said, how do you make all this work in India and China? And so it's pretty flipping damn easy, you know. You just say, let's have it in Chinese, you know. There we go. Simple. And real-time translation is pretty powerful stuff. Or let's take a moment to look at data handling. This is some Channel 4 stuff looking at, you know, these are things that were hugely difficult to do a little while back. This is London. And look, let's imagine you wanted a job right at the heart, right in Westminster. I mean, I'm guessing there'll be a few people looking for work around West Parliament Square shortly, you know. So let's imagine you were speculating on, maybe I could live there, you know. But if I was going to live in Westminster and I had to be at work by 9 o'clock and I didn't want to get up until, say, 8:22, 8:21, 8:20, where might I live? But actually, I'm only an MP, and they're not going to get much money now, are they? So, you know, let's think about house prices here for a moment. So, where are we? That's about 500,000 we're on here. If I go down below 500,000, you're pretty much the whole of West London's gone. So I'm left with East London, you know. And over here, I've got a beauty scale. So let's find places that are bugger. Look, there you go. So there's not many places left, are there? Really? You know? Maybe I should have to. Maybe I need to get up later. You know, but not much near the middle. And this is just interaction with you know, public data sets. But the power to do that, for everybody to do that, is just huge. This is a people century. Make no mistake. You know, we can do it. Here's a little radio quote, I think, from the Tea Party folk over in the States, who, as you know, are trying to rebuild the Republican Party. But it's kind of interesting because, well, let's hear what they've got to say.
First, it was organising angry healthcare protests. Now the Tea Party movement is credited with helping win last week's election in Massachusetts for the Republicans. Bill Alford, an organiser from Maryland, says they're determined to use their newfound power.
What's happened is, over most of our lifetimes, we all feel like the child in the class who's got the answer with their hand up and never gets called on. And eventually the child just clams up and doesn't get involved anymore. Well, finally, all of us have found a way to get in touch on the phone or by Facebook or email, and finally we're being heard. And now we even have microphones, and so now we can be heard 1,000 miles away.
And, you know, all he's saying, as so many communities are saying, we've got amplification, we've got information communication technology, we've got a voice. whether you agree with the voice or not is neither here nor there. You know, things are moving at a pace, really, is all I'm trying to say at this stage. And they're moving at a pace right through the age range. This is a project I did when the iPhones first came out. I gave them to a group of children, seen here sitting on my boat, actually, which makes an excellent seminar room, if you were a taxman. And we gave them all iPhones and gave them tasks. I said to them, find other people in your friends and family around the world who have an interesting learning day and find out what their learning day looks like. And they use social networking, they use messaging, they use text, they use everything really. They never used email once the whole year. And I said to them, then pointing to the email icon on there, I said, what do you think that's for? And one of them said, I think that's for people in business, she said. And I said, what is email? And they said, oh, that's what your dad does, which is a wonderful response. So as you go home, in a session earlier, somebody was complaining about getting 250 emails a day, so it must be a grandfather, never mind a father. The world's moved on. And that pace of change, I think, is wonderfully empowering. It's also, it's interesting to look at the time of all this, the timetable. As you said in the introduction, I've been building big online communities for a long time, and we started in '87. And I thought that first 15 years was quite interesting because they were all characterized by really a collegiality, people exchanging, swapping with each other. They were all project-based in terms of what happened. They were very cool. They were all global. They're 24/7. And some of these were pretty big. I mean, the thing with the cat, I think it was Guinness Book of Records' biggest internet learning community in the world at the time. We got tragically no Guinness. I thought I imagined the tanker would arrive at the gates and start pumping, but we got a certificate. It wasn't quite as good. But what we learned from all that, it turns out that now we're building. I built this Classroom of the Future in 2002, and blow me down. You know, I find that what we're building are collegiate, mixed age, project-based, cool, global, 24/7 learning environment. So why is that interesting? Because you hold the prototype of your company's future. What you're doing with online, what you're doing with wired learning, what you're doing with new models of learning will define your organization in 15 years' time. Make no mistake. You hold the keys to the future in the way that nobody else in the organization begins to. And if you wanted to see what 2025's learning spaces look like, it's easy peasy. We just look at today's online learning spaces, and what do we find? We find that they're community-based, they're self-supporting, they're not proprietary, not hardware-specific, they're cheap or they're free. Well, you can read the flipping list as well as I can, with unrecognizable business models. And that's the world that you're going into in your companies, in your organizations. You know it with certainty now. And that's jolly handy because it gives you a bit of jump on the other guys, doesn't it, really? Just give a sense of what happens with some of these opportunities. I'm just going to go back in time over 2 or 3 things. This was a wonderful thing where we put together the whole nation's head teachers, probably the least likely group to join an online community. So they weren't very wired, they didn't have laptops. We joined them all up, and here's what they said.
Talking Heads has made an enormous difference to me as a head because it's given me the opportunity to talk to like-minded colleagues who face a similar set of problems, both locally and nationally, that I've faced.
Talking Heads is like meeting all your other head teacher colleagues in the coffee break at a conference and being able to debate when you choose, for as long as you choose, the issues that are important to you.
The difference it's made to me being...
Well, they're going to go on. They all say the same thing, It was fascinating and electrifying, and indeed now to become a head teacher in this country, you're not even allowed to apply unless you've been part of an online community and have shared collaborative online work with others. You can't even put in your form. So, at a stroke, it's the National Professional Qualification for Headship is an online qualification, which if you haven't done it, you can't apply. And it has that requirement. So, you sense the ground shaking under your feet in all sorts of interesting ways. And let me say, it's not just the head teachers that are fascinated by all this, it's the kids as well. You mentioned Teachers TV, and I'm not actually supposed to show you this data, but who cares, These are the number of children who are watching Teachers TV at half terms, and you can see This, by the way, was back in '07, and you can see that Christmas, 477,000 children in this country are watching programs made by teachers for teachers about how to teach. Isn't that interesting? Whitsun half term. And golly gosh, look, summer half term, we were still over 400,000. What are they doing? They're fascinated by the process of learning. This is a learning century that we're in. This isn't a century of information, or information age, or digital age, an age of learning. These kids are voracious consumers of insights into how learning might be different and might be better. And no doubt they turn up in school and say, have you seen that, sir? I think you probably should. I'll send you the link. Be kind of helpful. The least likely people to watch it are our most senior teachers, interestingly enough. Which tells a story, I think, that you're all familiar with. It's worth just reflecting also, for a moment, on some of the current opportunities that are around. I've just put a project together with Jim Knight, the employment minister, which just gives you a sense of how the world is changing. And I helped define the University for Industry all those years ago. With unemployment, and we have a tragedy of unemployment here, not as bad actually as in the States. This time around, people have taken salary cuts, and they've been much more, I think, mature about the whole thing. But if you are unemployed, somebody says to you, "Look, you're deficient. You're no good because you're out of work. But don't worry, we've found a shortage. There are no plumbers in London, so we're going to create a course for you. And you're going to go on the course after we've created it, and then you'll be accredited. And by that time, because there'll be too many plumbers in London, because they've all arrived anyway, and you'll be unemployed in a new industry." How does that sound, Pretty exciting. Where can I start, And it does damn all for your self-esteem. So what we're doing instead is just this. We're turning it into a sabbatical, really. Look, you're out of work. But while you were in work, there must have been stuff you learned that was useful. Your manager at Woolworths, you were running a steel company, you were a security officer on a bit about health and safety, would you mind just swapping what you know with other people while you're out of work? And would you mind doing that online, please, because that's where it is. And of course, while they do that, they're picking up a whole set of 21st century capabilities. They rebuild their esteem. They genuinely do swap their skills and capabilities. And of course, they're able to work at a distance, work with others, work online, work reflectively, all those 21st century agile skills. So what we do instead is, by reflecting on people's capability, we're repairing the damage of structural unemployment. Your industry's gone, with a set of capabilities that let you work in the industry. And here's another one very, very much like it, which I think I'll just take a moment to explain. I put a workplace degree together, which was really interesting. A lot of my university work is in putting workplace degrees together, and they're quite exciting. And just to give you a sense of what they could be like, here's Bournemouth's rather exciting master's program. So you want to do a master's program, you're working in the new media industry. What would you like on your mixtape? I think I'll do that module. I think I'll do that module. I'll do that one. I'll do that one. I think I'll do that one. I'll do that one. Actually, to be honest, I'd like to do that one first. What's that? That's going to give you a postgraduate diploma. Okay, let's go for it. So people just mix their own degrees, and we deliver them. It's really, really, really simple. It's easy to do that because the students themselves are a central part of the process. But what happens when you build that a completely open model is fascinating. I built this rather exciting ultraversity degree. This is all ancient history, all this, but it's interesting to look back on. And we put people together, and each one of them followed a bespoke degree. And what they did full-time for 3 years was what they studied full-time for 3 years. It was the same thing. It was a full-time degree, but they were in work the whole time. We didn't say stop work, go to a university, work for 3 years, pay enormous bills, and with a bit of luck, after you've finished, your job will still be open, you can go back. What we said was, you're enjoying what you're doing, why don't we just progress you in it cheaply and effectively? What was fascinating was the level of mutuality that came out of all this, and this is a little clip. The person on the right, on the left, as you're looking at it, is a mum. The person on the right is an ICT technician in school. They're doing the same degree, but obviously entirely different content. And here's what they said to each other.
Called for doing other support things and stuff. It's opened quite a few doors that
This is the first time they'd met ever, because it was a graduation.
we'd never have had opened without it.
Yeah.
In other distance learning, this has been so much more supportive and in comparison.
The community's been fantastic, isn't it?
I wouldn't have survived without people like yourself
Oh, thank you.
and stuff there, especially in the first year.
Yeah.
I found it really tough and different things and stuff, but people like yourself who kept us going and stuff, and it became a team, and then we never met, I think we were actually
It's fantastic actually meeting up.
stronger as a team.
We know each other, but we've never met, so it's weird.
And you could mention about fun things, and we did have some fun online,
Oh, yes,
different
yeah.
things and stuff, and the celebration on the last night was quite funny.
Actually, it was the celebration on last night was not a glowing success. They all went to their keyboards and tried to get drunk and type to each other. It was quite difficult, you know. Google has no translator for that, I'm afraid. Well, not yet. But you hear the mutuality, you hear the self-support, you hear the membership, you hear the sense of community that's coming out of that really, really loud and clear. And currently what we're doing with that, just quite excitingly, I've got this mumology degree just kicking off, which is great. Mum, in the British way, I don't have a mumology degree, but actually somebody else has bought that domain, so maybe there's hope. And I'm simply saying to parents, look, you give me the first few years of your attention whilst your baby matures to school age, and I'll help you reflect on that process. I'll help you to know all the things that we don't know and your grandmother and your mother don't know about child development, about process, about reading, about everything else. And your research population's right there on your lap. This is a research degree. And by the time your child hits school, you will be able to work at a distance, work with others, work collaboratively, work as a graduate. And you start to realise just the beginning of some of the power of all this. We're looking at learning in entirely new places. We're looking at learning with entirely new opportunities. Learning suddenly becomes the catalyst that transforms economies. You imagine what this does in a poor rural area where the cost of building schools was astronomical. You've got to build a school, you've got to put teachers in it, you've got to pay the teachers. We're dirt poor, how are we going to do all that? Suddenly now, the act of having children is the economic catalyst that transforms the area. You start to get a sense, you start to get a real sense of what learning is doing in terms of literally turning our world around. The most exciting way, and so much of it, is work-placed and located and vocational and applied learning. Well, we're coming to questions in a moment. I agreed we'd leave a big chunk of time for questions, which I think is hugely important. But there's just a couple more bits and pieces I just wanted to touch on before we quite get there. Firstly, some of the things that are a mess at the moment. One of them is accreditation. We are in proper trouble with our assessment and accreditation systems. I'm in a big project with Pearson to try and turn that around. But give you some sense of the problem. Here's a midwife speaking.
I was a midwife in China. I have finished 2 years training, some of the time in hospital. And then I worked for 4 years in my village, delivering many babies. And now I work here in a hospital in England. But instead, I work in the kitchen, reheating frozen meals. My experience in China doesn't count. People think Chinese medicines is just herbs and potions, but midwifery is much the same world over. Maybe I'll requalify one day, but it seems a waste of time because I have so much practice already.
Now, you can see, I think, straight away that if we can build a world where learning is a continuum, where we expect learning of our parents, of our children, of our communities, in our corporate sector, that sort of discontinuity, that sort of waste simply stops happening. She's got to take so much time out to retrain, to do something she can already do. We can't afford to waste that amount of time anymore. So I think we have got some big and substantial challenges. We've got some great excitements. Here's the work of the Cayman Islands. Here's what the Cayman Islands wanted simply of their citizens. So you imagine you're a government, you've turned over your complete education system, you've torn the whole thing up, started all over again. They only want 4 outputs of it, but I'll tell you what, they're great outputs, aren't they? Look at those. And what do they want from their teachers and lecturers? Even less. They just wanted people who would adapt, were confident decision makers, because they're going to have to make the decision because it's moving too quickly for anybody to tell you what to do, and we wanted them too to be lifelong learners. You know, these are simple, simple things. So you get a real sense that around the world, you know, people are waking up to a world beyond training, a world beyond productivity, you know, a world of remarkable and radical new learning. And I'm just going to leave you two quick things, really. Firstly, I think probably this. You know, if you want a quick summary as you phrase your question, it's really this simple. Those 20th century models, really, were all about building big things that did things for people, or indeed did things to people. In this century, it's absolutely all about helping people to help each other. And in learning terms, nothing would make a bigger difference than building that mutuality, that collegiality, that helping people to help each other, that ask three, then me model of learning that is so, so effective. And it's spectacularly cheap. The old hierarchical model of delivering, you know, with the rigid structures that we built and the huge amounts of expenditure on content, are unsustainable in this age. So, you know, you're a new world. I think it's an electrifying world, a hugely exciting world. And I'd also say, just in passing, that it's a world that seems to me to be addressed the jobs that are out there still. You know, we've got plenty of unskilled manual jobs left. We've got heaps of skilled manual jobs with plenty of skilled clerical jobs, but unskilled clerical jobs are vanishing fast and indeed have disappeared. So much of the learning that I see, new learning or old learning, is still unskilled clerical work. Children in this country were asked, a bit like Family Fortunes, when they just ask a few thousand children, what do you think you spend most of your time doing in your learning? Their response was, we think we spend most of our time copying. 52% of them said copying is the thing we spend most of our time doing. Just been had a long argument with the Navy yesterday, curiously enough, about the design of a new learning institution, which was full of cells and bells, you know, rags and rows of desks with poor ratings. We're going to sit and copy and learn to do what they would never be engaged in doing with that model. So somehow, you know, we've got to, in a very simple way, take learning on into a new century. And I don't think it's a very hard thing to do. Well, let's go to some questions. I won't show you more stuff. You know, we're in a world of no secrets, so ask me anything you like. This is, while you ask that, there's a road sign just around the corner from my house.